Let me begin today and we'll talk about federalism. If you see the world government, if you look at the government world around, there are two types of primarily government. One is called federal government and another is called unitary government. Unitary government. Now, if you look at unitary government is a very much old government, right? Where the authority is very much concentrated in monarch. Look at the France, right? France had monarchy, right, before French Revolution, right? And it was a very unitary government, right? Look at Britain, it had monarch in say 16th century, right? And later on it actually transformed into democracy. It transformed, but look at again remain a unitary government. On the other hand, if you look at the federal government around the globe, it is very much decentralized form of government. What it is? Decentralization is the characteristics of you know federal government, and in the federal government power is shared. Power, now if you look at it, is all about power sharing. Federal government where the power is shared, right? And if you see, so federal government is a modern type of government. It is a modern political arrangement in which what happened, power and authority along with responsibility is divided between two or more layers of government. If you look at federalism, it is a modern political arrangement in which what happened, in which authority and power as well as responsibility divided between two or more layers of government, two or more layers of government. What does it mean? It means in federal government, if you look at least there shall be two layers of government, right? So if you look at in federal government, there are two layers of government, two layers of government, at least two layers of government, right? Now first layer is called national government, national, or somewhere it is called federal, right? Somewhere it is called union government, and the second layer of government is called a state government, right? Right? There may be third layer of government also, that is a more federal, right? So if you look at the federalism is a modern political arrangement in which power and authority as well as responsibility divided between two or more layers of government. That is called federal government, right? So if you look at least there are, you have dual government. You have dual government. This is a basic idea of federalism, right? Basic idea of federalism, right? Now let me tell you the about unitary government. Here unitary government, there is only one government, right, which controls everything, right? For example, if you look at France, UK, China, this is a unitary government. And if you look at the US, right, India, Canada, right, Australia, right? Russia. These are all basically the federal government, right? Now let me tell you the short story about federal government, and then I'll tell you the other characteristics of the federalism, right? How a government can be called federal government. Only one characteristics which I talked about, that is rural government, right? This is a modern form of government where at least there are two layers of government. There may be third layer, there may be fourth layer, no issue, but at least there should be two layers of government, और इनके बीच पावर डिवाइडेड होगा. इनके पास पावर होगा, इनके पास पावर होगा, इनके पास भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होगी, इनके पास भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होगी, right? Now let me tell you the evolution of the federal government in the modern world. The US is the first federal government in the world. The US is the first federal government in the world. Now, what happened if you look at during the US freedom struggle, right? If you look at 13 states come together, right? How many states? 13 states. 13 states came together and they agreed, let's why make the two layers of government. Let's make two layers of government. One is a federal government who shall be responsible for the important subjects like communication, defense, currency, external affair, and another is called state government, who shall look after the ordinary matter of the state, right? Whosoever matter is, right? So if you look at 13 states actually came and they decided to make federal government, and more 37 states later joined it, right? So if you look at how many states are there are 50 states in the USA, and this is why if you look at US is known as coming together federalism. Coming together federalism. Now look at many states came together, and what they first made? The dual government. The first what they made? The dual. What is a dual government? The two layers of government. What is that two layers? Federal and states. But यहीं पर आके नहीं रुके वो. They also made they had written constitution. What they had? Written constitution. They wrote constitution. If you look at America, right, is the first country which actually wrote constitution. So they wrote constitution. Why is it so? Because in the constitution you have to write what is the power of the federal government, what is the power of the state government. राइट ऐसे नहीं चलती है कुछ काम आपने मुंह से बोल दिया ऐसे नहीं चलेगा, कल से आप बदल गए तो. So there should be written constitution. So they wrote constitution so that the two layers of government can function better, right? And if you look at इतना ही नहीं रुके वो, और ये भी किया कि ये जो फेडरल गवर्नमेंट है ना, फेडरल गवर्नमेंट यहां का जो लेजिस्लेचर है दैट शुड बी द बाइकैमरल. The federal legislature shall be bicameral, right? So if you look at the US Congress, हमारे यहाँ पार्लियामेंट बोलते हैं, वहां पर क्या बोलते हैं? कांग्रेस बोलते हैं. ये दो बाइकैमरल है, यानी कि दो हाउस है यहाँ पर. एक को बोलते हैं सीनेट और दूसरे को बोलते हैं हम क्या बोलते हैं? द हाउस ऑफ रिप्रेजेंटेटिव. द हाउस ऑफ रिप्रेजेंटेटिव. And if you look at the Senate is a federal chamber. Senate is a federal chamber. What does it mean? The each यूनिट्स, जो हर स्टेट है ना उसका 2 मेंबर वहां पर है, यानी कि सीनेट में कितनी स्ट्रेंथ है यहां पर 200 स्ट्रेंथ है। अब सॉरी 50 से ना 5,000 100 वही होगा, या 100 स्ट्रेंथ है यहां पर, राइट। यानी कि अपर हाउस जो है दैट इज रिप्रेजेंट द स्टेट, कि जब कभी भी कानून बनेगा तो इनका भी से रहेगा, नहीं तो पार्लियामेंट क्या करेगी, जो अपर लेयर ऑफ गवर्नमेंट है वो अपना कानून अपने हिसाब से बना लेगी, राइट। बट इसको रोका जा सके इसीलिए क्या किया गया है, ये आइडिया ला गया है कि अपर हाउस जो है, द अपर हाउस शैल बी द रिप्रेजेंटेटिव ऑफ द स्टेट्स। सो द फेडरल चैम्बर is basically, right, the upper house. So look at what is the third characteristics of the federal states, bicameralism. What do you mean by bicameralism? Bicameralism means the union legislature, the national legislature shall have 2 houses, and the upper house shall actually represent the, it will be the federal chamber. ये फेडरल चैम्बर होगा, ठीक है। Although if you look at Britain has also bicameral, it has 2 houses, House of Lord and House of Common, but Britain is not example of the फेडरल स्टेट बिकॉज वहां पर डुअल गवर्नमेंट तो है नहीं, राइट, वहां पर रिटन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन नहीं है, राइट, तो और भी आपको देखना पड़ेगा, राइट, राइट। तीसरी बात अगर आप देखेंगे, राइट, तीसरा कैरेक्टरिस्टिक फेडरल गवर्नमेंट का कि देयर विल बी इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी। इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी, व्हाट इज इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी, कि भाई कभी झगड़ा हो गया इन दोनों में तो क्या होगा, राइट, व्हेन देयर इज अ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट now between the 2 layers of government, who will resolve this matter? Judiciary. The judiciary shall resolve all the conflict between the federal government and state government, or between state governments. So judiciary is going to resolve all the conflict. So independent judiciary is a essential element in federal state when US established itself as a federal government, right? Okay. Now if you look at, so you had 4 characteristics. One is the dual government, second is the written constitution, the third is the bicameralism, and the within that bicameralism the upper house should be the federal chamber. The upper house should be the federal chamber, as I have already explained. Look at the Congress, right? So Congress has 2 houses, Senate and the House of Representatives, and Senate is the basically federal chamber, right? And the fifth is, the separation of power. Separation of power. Separation of power means here that federal government, will have its own list to make law, and the state government will have its own list to make law, right? And the federal government will not intervene in the state matters, and the state will not intervene in the federal matter. Making sense, right? So if you look at the federal government, the first federal government evolved on this earth is basically the US. US evolved first time as a federal government, right? And how did they evolve? Basically, if you look at, there was an American freedom movement against the Britain, right? And movement was going on in several states. Now 13 states came together first so that they can make the federal arrangement, they can stay together united, right? They can have common, foreign policy, the defense system, but state will be allowed to run their own affair, right? Now, later on, if you look at more states joined it and federalism evolved in US. And if you look at the basic characteristics of federalism that evolved in the US was the five. One is the dual government. It means every federal government, right, or to be called government as a federal or not, it should have, अगर दो लेयर्स ऑफ गवर्नमेंट है तो वो हम बोल सकते हैं फेडरल गवर्नमेंट है, बट केवल यही तरीका नहीं, बट ये बेसिक है, ये बेसिक है. कोई भी यूनिटरी गवर्नमेंट में आपको टू लेयर्स ऑफ गवर्नमेंट नहीं मिलेगा. आपको हो सकता है रिटन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन मिल जाए जैसे फ्रांस में है. फ्रांस हैज रिटन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बट इट इज नॉट अ फेडरल गवर्नमेंट. ठीक है. बाइकैमरलिज्म भी मिल जाए जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल ब्रिटेन हैज बाइकैमरल. इट हैज हाउस ऑफ लॉर्ड एंड हाउस ऑफ कॉमन बट इट इज नॉट अ फेडरल कंट्री. नाउ आपको इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी भी मिल जाए, राइट. एग्जैक्टली दिमाग में मेरे पास आ नहीं रहा है डेफिनेशन, राइट. बट ये जो चीज है सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर, राइट, सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर, आपको डुअल गवर्नमेंट, ये सब चीज क्या है, बेसिक्स है किसी भी फेडरल अरेंजमेंट के. समझ में आया कौन कौन सा बेसिक है? द डुअल गवर्नमेंट, द फेडरल सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर एंड ऑल्सो इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी. क्योंकि भाई दोनों में झगड़ा होगा तो कौन सुलझाएगा? इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी. Look at how federalism evolved in Britain. Making sense? Have you noted down all these 4-5 characteristics of? Now, आपको अगर क्वेश्चन मिले कि भाई कोई कंट्री फेडरल है कि नहीं है, तो how will you decide? You have to look, right? Bicameralism देखना है, आपको देखना है कि जो अपर हाउस है, राइट, और लोअर हाउस है, फेडरल चैम्बर, यानी अपर हाउस में जो लोग आना चाहिए कहां से आना चाहिए? States should come and they represent the interest of the states. So I hope you have written this and what America is known as, what kind of federalism it is? Coming together federalism. What kind of federalism America is? Coming together federalism. But what about India? Is India a coming together federalism or not? Then what? Now, India is not a case of coming together federalism. India is known as holding together federalism. Right? India is not coming together. Now, look at independence. Unitedly we fought against Britain, and we had big territory, right? And India became independent, and later on we framed the constitution, and then we thought that no, since we are a large country, it's a big subcontinent, we have to make India united, right? So we have to go for power. We have to go for power sharing. So in order to hold India together, we actually made the federal arrangement, right? So if you look at Indian federalism, right, Indian federalism is a case of holding what kind of federalism it is? Holding together federalism, right? Now if you see holding together federalism, that means it is a different than the coming together federalism. Now look at other characteristics which I talked about federalism, whether India has or not, right? First, if you look at dual government, do we have dual government? Do we have dual government? Yes or no? Yes, we have, right? So yes, let's check. Right, about India's federalism. So we have dual government. The national level government we call union government. We are talking about Indian federalism right now. So what we call union government. Even term federalism is not mentioned in the Indian constitution. The word federalism is not mentioned in the Indian constitution. Right? Now if you look at Article 1, which declares India that that is Bharat shall be the union of states. Right? And the other form of the lower level of government is called, what is that? State government. So we have two layers of government, right? The upper layer of government is called union government. The lower level of government is called state government. And look at, we established the third layer of government, that is local government, right? Local self-government later on. So we have three layers of government. We have not only two layers of government. We have three layers of government. Okay? The union government, the state government and the local government. So look at the first criteria. Of course, India meets the first criteria, that is dual government, right? Now check the another written constitution. Do we have written constitution? Yes, we have written constitution. We have written constitution, the world most lengthiest constitution we have, है ना? इतना देख रहे हो, पढ़ के कितने बार पढ़ोगे तब भी याद नहीं रहता है. उसके बाद if you look at original, yeah, what about bicameralism? Do we have bicameralism? Do we have bicameralism? Now if you look at bicameralism means, I'm talking about the union parliament, right? Parliament. Has parliament two house? Yes, parliament has two house. One is called Rajya Sabha and another is called Lok Sabha. Now, is Rajya Sabha is a federal chamber? Is the member of the Rajya Sabha represent the interest of the states? Yes. The members of the Rajya Sabha are basically, elected, right, from the state legislature, right, and they represent the interest at the union level, right? What Rajya Sabha represents? Rajya Sabha represents the interest of the states at union level, right? So basically Rajya Sabha is a federal chamber. Rajya Sabha is a federal chamber, right? So we have bicameralism. That means if you look at the union parliament, which has two houses, the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and the upper house is basically a federal chamber. So look at this criteria also fulfilled. Now let me move to the next criteria. Look at the next criteria, independent judiciary. Do we have independent judiciary? Yes, we have independent judiciary. We have independent judiciary. Whenever there is a conflict between the states and union, then judiciary resolve those conflicts. Or whenever there is a conflict among the states, right, of the legal nature, then who resolve this conflict? The judiciary resolve the conflict. So we have independent judiciary, right? Now what about separation of power? Do we have separation of power? Yeah, we have separation of power. How can you say that we have separation of power? Look at the 7th schedule. Look at the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, where you have three lists. You have three lists. Union list, then you have a state list, then you have concurrent list. Now look at, in union list there are several items. There are items on which the union government has exclusive power to make law, right? Similarly, and that is called list 1. That is called list 1. The state list, that is called list 2, and again you have several items, right, in a state list on which state has exclusive power to make law. On the other hand, if you look at concurrent list, you have multiple items on which center and the state both have authority to make law, right? So look at, then we fulfill all criteria, right? As I have described you, to identify a certain country can be called as a federal or not. So can India be called federal? India, yes, India is a federal country. On the other hand, if you look at, I told you that even the word federalism is not mentioned in the Indian constitution, right? Look at. So look at the unitary features. Unitary features of the Indian constitution. Now if you look at, Article 1, what Article 1 says? That India is a union of states. India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. What does it mean? It is not a federation of states. It is not a federation of states. It is a union of states. Right? And if you look at Article 2 and Article 3, you know that Parliament can change the boundary of a states. Not only boundary, it can change also the name of the state, and it can merge two states, and even it can destroy the identity of the state. For example, उत्तर प्रदेश है ना, राइट, या बंगाल बहुत चौड़ा हो रहा है, तो मान लो कि पार्लियामेंट को मन करे तो बंगाल को 4 पार्ट में बांटेंगे और थोड़ा सिक्किम को दे देंगे, थोड़ा झारखंड को दे देंगे, राइट, ऐसे से बांट देंगे, थोड़ा ओडिशा को दे देंगे और हो गया खत्म, बंगाल खत्म. Now the diminish, right, the boundary of the state, right? The parliament has power to diminish the boundary of the state. The parliament has to power to create a new state. तो भाई क्या है फिर वो स्टेट का क्या मतलब है? When you said that we have dual government, you have dual government, right? And where we said dual government, na, state government, but you are amongst the state itself. The the parliament has power to change the state itself. Can we call it as a federal government? No, it is not. Right? There is a problem in federal government. If this is the characteristics, if this is the characteristic that the union government, the parliament, can change boundary, right? The parliament can create new state. The parliament can create new states, right? The parliament can diminish a state, right? Now, can we say that then India is a federal state? What is the meaning of federalism when the parliament can diminish the state? बताओ. What is the meaning of federal, right? Okay. Now, even if you look at the emergency provision, so first, if you look at the first 3 articles, right, which is not substantiating the argument that India is a federal state. The first three articles, the very first three articles of the Indian Constitution, 1, 2, 3, is not substantiating the argument, not defending the argument that India is a federal state. Now, this three reflects India is a unitary state, right? Now, let me tell you another provisions of the Indian Constitution, right? Look at the another provisions of the Indian Constitution, right? Now, if you look at emergency provision, right? Do you know we have three types of emergency provision, right? One is called national emergency, right? That is under Article 352. And then you have called a state emergency. A state emergency. That is under Article 356. And another is called financial services, financial emergency. Financial emergency. And that is under Article 3. Now look at, during national emergency, the entire political system of India transformed into a unitary, right? The power is concentrated, right, in the hand of the union, right? And if you look at state, becomes standstill, cannot do anything. Even the lawmaking power, the executive power of the states become null and void during the national emergency. Right? Now, can we say that India is a federal country by looking at this provision of the Indian Constitution? We can't say that, right? We can say that India is a unitary by looking at, particularly looking at this provision, national emergency, right? Now, even a state emergency, look at the state emergency, right? Now, any government of the state can be toppled by the union government, right? Nahin. The national government, the union government in India can impose emergency, a state emergency, right? And do you know which state has seen maximum time of state emergency in India? Manipur, right? I think still Manipur is under state emergency, right? Manipur has witnessed maximum time of state emergency. So look at emergency provision. Now look at the office of governor. Office of governor. Office of governor. Now who appoint governor? The governor is appointed by the President of India. So governor is basically the nominee of the center in states, right? And look at this office is very controversial in Indian politics, right? When the state government is not run by the same party which hold power at the center, then in those states you can find there is a conflict between the governor and the chief minister. The chief minister is an elected, member from the house, and house itself is elected directly by the people of that state. But this man, the office governor, is appointed by the center. Right? Look at in current era Bengal, where governor often contradicts with chief minister, right? Or Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra, okay. So you look at the office of governor also does not reflect India as a federal state, right? Because governor hinders in the working of the assembly or the state government. Okay? So office of governor is also reflects India is a unitary state. Now if you look at, we have also single citizenship. We have single citizenship. Now if you go to US and if you see US, in US there is a dual citizenship. The citizen of the US and citizen of the particular state. Citizen of the particular state. Right? But what do we follow? We follow single citizenship. Then if you look at all India services, all India services, look at IAS or IPS. Now who recruit this IAS and IPS? Right? It is recruited by the center, district of states, right? ये state है, मान लीजिए, ठीक है? So look at the all India services is also represents that India is a more, unitary state than a federal state. Yeah. Now further, if you look at bodies like CAG or Election Commission. Now look at these are the basically states, right? So look at all features. These all features reflects that India is a unitary state. India is a unitary state. So look at the bodies like Election Commission or CAG or Finance Commission, right? These all are bodies, basically union bodies, but decides the fate of the state. For example, Finance Commission decides about the revenue share of the for the states. What Finance Commission decides? Finance Commission decides the revenue of Finance Commission. If you look at if you look at it, all these characteristics, these all are the unitary characteristics, and therefore, there's a scholar PSIR, and he called India is a quasi-federal state. What PSIR called? India is a PSIR called India as a quasi-federal state. Quasi-federal state. What do you mean by quasi-federal state? Quasi-federal state means half federal, half unitary. Right? Half federal and half unitary. That is called, described by one scholar.
Sir, could you repeat the part of Finance Commission? The sound was cut off at that time.
Look at the Finance Commission. I was talking about, look, Finance Commission, decides the share for states, revenue share. But look at Finance Commission. Finance Commission is a central body. Their chairperson and members are actually appointed by the central government. Right? So look at not only Finance Commission, look at the Election Commission, look at the CAG, even look at the UPSC, right? UPSC recruit IAS or IPS, right? But they have been sent to the states, right? So IAS represents the state, right? Basically, right? IAS represents the union government, not the state, union government, right? So if you look at several characteristics of Indian federalism, it is called quasi-federal, right? So, got the idea? Making sense? Yeah. But I'll talk about the all legislative, executive, administrative, and financial relation. If you look at the power sharing between states and union, union has more power right? In most of the case, and that's why it is called that Indian constitution is more biased towards the central government. We'll discuss that, right? So what India is called? India is called quasi-federal states. State. Good idea. Quasi-federalism, right? Now another idea that I would like to discuss here, cooperative federalism. So look at India is a model of quasi-federalism, right? Quasi-federalism. Yeah, am I audible now to everyone?
Yes, sir, yes.
Yes, sir.
Did you get the idea of quasi-federal? Why India is called quasi-federal states? Because India
Yes.
has also quality of federal government. There are many provisions which makes the center, the union government more powerful, more biased toward the center, more biased toward the center, and that's why India is called quasi-federalism, right? Now, if you look at one more basic idea that I would like to give to you, that look, federalism has been defined another way also, right? And what is that way? One is called cooperative federalism. Cooperative federalism. Yeah. Before I begin cooperative federalism, let me talk about, look, federalism has been also defined that power sharing. As I told you that corporate federalism is also about self-rule and shared rule. What is federalism? Federalism. Federalism is all about self-rule and shared rule. Now, when you say shared rule, what do you mean by shared rule? Shared rule means you have, you know, union government and the state government. Union government and the state government. And the state government. Now, both are sharing power. Both are sharing power. For example, let me tell you, the law and order power is with state government. Law and power with state government. But if you look at when there is a disturbances, right, then it is a union government to maintain the peace, right? It become duty of the central government when there is a emergency, when there is a threat to any state. Now the union government shall maintain peace, right? Now similarly, if you look at another, look at education, give you education. Now education, the central government is also responsible to education, right? The state government gives education of the like primary education, right? Now the union government gives the higher education in case of central university. State government also gives higher education, but union government also gives higher education, right? So it is a shared role. Look at, seventh schedule is all about sharing. Seventh schedule, especially the concurrent list, is all about sharing, right? But if you look at a state list, of course, a state have authority, and on union list, union has authority roles. Now, when we talk about self-government, local self-government. Now, if you look at, we have third layer of the government, and that is called local self-government. Yeah. So, if you see local self-government, there are multi, right? Basically, there are two types of local self-government. One is called rural, and another is called government, urban local self-government. Now there are multiple types of rural government. One is panchayat. Panchayat is basically very popular. In most of the states, you can find panchayat as a rural local self-government, right? So federalism is also described as the self-rule and shared rule. When you talk about shared rule, it means the sharing power, right, by both the union government as well as state government. For example, education, right? As you talk about self-rule, then it is basically the local self-government, the urban local self-government and the rural local self-government. Look, federalism is all about self-rule and shared rule. Shared rule means power is shared between the state government and union government. For example, look at education, or look at the seventh schedule, where the state list has been devoted to the state, and the union list is actually devoted to the union government. So in union list there are several subjects on which the parliament can make law, and in a state list there are several subjects on which state can make law. On concurrent list, both the center and the state can make law. Whenever you talk about self-rule implies the local self-government. And in India we have two types of local self-government. One is the rural local self-government and another is urban. In local self-government, panchayat is very popular. In several states there are panchayats, right? Okay. Now let me move to the cooperative federalism. Cooperative federalism. Now, if you see cooperative federalism described by Granville Austin, Granville Austin had written a book called Indian Constitution, the Cornerstone of Nation, and he described Indian federalism as a cooperative federalism. Right? What does it mean? It does mean look at the union government, right, and the state government. Both cooperate, right, to govern the country, to govern the territory, right, to maintain law and order, right? Now, for example, if you look at the administration, right? So you had IS, IPS, and you had a state level officer, right? Now both, if you look at IS and IPS, they are basically represents the center, and the state government basically appointed by the state government, right? And both cooperate in order to administer the territory, right? Now on the other hand, if you look at policy, right? Now if you look at, there are many centrally sponsored schemes, centrally sponsored scheme, right? Now there are two types of scheme. One is called centrally sectoral scheme, and another is called centrally sponsored scheme. If you look at, there are two types of scheme, right? Centrally sponsored scheme and centrally sectoral schemes, right? Now centrally sponsored scheme, where state and center both share fund, right? So fund is shared between central and states, and here this is a fully centrally funded, right? Fully funded by the center. Now, when scheme is comes to the state, now look at both the center and state government implement the scheme, right? Whether it is a Jan Dhan Yojana or whether it is a Pradhan Mantri, Sadak Yojana or the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, whatsoever scheme comes, right? The central government and the state government both cooperate each other in order to implement. So if you look at the federal government, this federalism is called cooperative federalism. This is called cooperative federalism. So Indian federalism is a model of cooperative federalism, right? Now Indian federalism is also, if you look at Niti Aayog, as also Aayog also promotes cooperative federalism in India. Prime Minister again and again several times speaks that India is a model of cooperative federalism, right? And what does it mean? It means the central government and the state governments both cooperate each other, both collaborate each other, right, in order to implement any government schemes, right, in order to administer area, right, so that more and more development we can provide to the society, right? So that is basically Niti Aayog also talks about cooperative federalism, right? But Niti Aayog also talk about competitive federalism. Competitive federalism, which I'll discuss in the next class. The competitive federalism, I'll talk about asymmetric federalism, right? So different model of federalism I will discuss, and then I will move to discuss the center-state relation, the administrative relation, the legislative relations, and also the financial relation between center and state. Got the idea? Yug, Shamya, Shreya, Arya.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So I'll stop here and see you in the next class.